Welcome back to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. Very happy to be joined this week by Kelly Ryan Bailey, who's the founder and host of Let's Talk About Skills, Baby, the podcast. And she's also the director of open skills at EMSI. Kelly, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thank you so much, Michael. So excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you. As a fellow podcaster, I will say I've gotten a lot of value out of the stuff you're putting out there into the world. It's Let's Talk About Skills, Baby is a fun title. It's a sign that you're not taking yourself too seriously, but you're talking about some really interesting, relevant work, and you do it in a fun way. So I think all those things seem very similar to what I aspire to do with this show. So hopefully you feel like you're among kindred spirits, and hopefully our listeners will be ready to lean into what you got going on. But to start, I'd love to begin by asking you for your origin story. How did you get to this point in your life and your career so that folks on a trend spotting show about education and learning would want to learn more about you? So the floor is yours. What got you to this point in your life?
Firstly, thank you for those kind words. And I feel the same, like just about your podcast. I'm really enjoying it. I love all the new stuff you're about to embark upon as well. Let me tell you a little bit about my origin story, which actually started when I was in college. So I think for educators, this will be quite interesting, but maybe not a story that is a new story to be heard. I was in school and I was a traditional student for most respects. I went from high school directly into college. I went to College of Charleston in South Carolina.
Yep. Go
Cougars.
There you go. Yeah. Yes.
But I was untraditional in the sense that I actually paid my way through school. So I was working 4 to 5 part-time jobs at any given time, going to school all year round because I couldn't take a full, even though I was almost at a full schedule, I needed to accommodate time for work. So I tended to stick around like the 12 credit range and just went all the time. Very middle class traditional. I didn't grow up in extremely well-off household, but like we did okay. My father was a dentist and he pretty much paved the path for me. I was going to be a dentist and take over his practice. And I didn't really have much say in the matter. I was signed up to complete 3 years of an undergraduate degree in biology and move right into dental school from there. And the funny thing was at about 2.5 years into this degree, I realized this is not for me. On the plus side, I started working in his dental office. My family was just really big on working hard. I started working there when I was about 10 years old, just doing files. And then I moved on to insurance, helping actually file insurance claims and learning all about that. I worked directly with the office manager. And then when I was 12, he trained me to be a dental assistant.
Wow.
And then back then you could become a dental assistant without actually going to get a certificate like you might today. I just got an X-ray certification and I was ready to go.
Yeah.
So when I went to school, most of my jobs, I was lucky enough that I had this background. By the time I was in college, I didn't have to work in a restaurant, wait tables. I could make quite significantly more working in these dental offices and for oral surgeons and things. But what I realized was that because I got a chance to live that life, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And when I made this change, this was before everything was technically enabled. We still had index cards in like a binder in the career services office that no one ever knew where that was. It was like, and I thought, man, I really would love to work in New York City. This is what was in my head. I had no, concept of what I knew what marketing was from one of the classes. But there was nothing that beyond like my hard research, in LexisNexis, and there was no way for me to find out a ton of information. So when I made this shift, it was really difficult. And I knew financially, I couldn't afford to go to school for any longer than that 3-year period. So it was also a lot of going through the books and trying to navigate and make this change in my life. And what ended up happening was I graduated with a business degree at the end of all of this. I should probably go back and check to see if I actually qualified for that biology degree, because now after what I've learned, I'm like, man, I was this close, but I never looked back. And when I graduated, just like the majority, I feel like this is the same story that we hear today. Granted, it was right after 9/11. This is the job market had a downturn at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I struggled to find work. And when I finally found a job, I was making, the jobs were offering less than I was making by half of my part-time jobs.
Wow. Yeah.
And I ended up moving back home. I couldn't afford rent. I couldn't, all of those things, because I was like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do in life. This is the dream, right? At the time, I was working with adults. So one of my adult colleagues, her husband, who didn't have a college degree, was offered a job at a place. I remember this just like it was yesterday because I was in shock, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
He was offered a job at Nucor Steel, which is about half an hour away from where we lived in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to put him through a work study program through just right there on the job training. He was going to earn a certificate within 6 weeks, and they offered him $80,000.
Wow.
Now, for me, I was offered full-time job with a bachelor's degree, $28,000.
Yeah.
I realize this is a while ago, but still, I was just in shock that there were other things besides what I knew about. Not that I don't think a bachelor's degree or education is important,
right?
Just that for me, in the time and place in my life and the uncertainty of where I wanted to go, that there was ever a consideration to go in other directions did not even dawn on me.
Yeah. It also sounds, because you had to earn your way through college, the return on investment was very front and center
Completely.
to you, in the way that someone who had a full ride or had parents who were paying, like it's a different scenario. So if you had to actually pay your own earned wages in order to get your degree, you want to get the right level of return on that. And then to hear that someone who really didn't go down that path can earn more than twice what you were earning, could see how that would be an eye-opener, to say the least. And then I guess that helped you drill in on the concept of skills, and how the skills in the marketplace maybe mean different things depending on. Continue your story. I don't mean to jump the gun.
But you're right. The thing is that it didn't dawn on me right away. This event happened in my life, and then I was just trying to find a job that made money and do what people do. And I was just thinking in my head that I would have made it when I got to wear a suit and work in a fancy office in New York City. That's what I really thought was the make it.
Yep.
And so when I actually did get a job in New York City a few years later, and I wore the fancy suit, and I was just the job was actually with a subsidiary of Randstad. And so I was working with hiring managers and HR professionals to help them hire IT consultants.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment. So I thought, number one, I'm thinking like, this is the life, this is success. I'm right here. But what I realized was, man, what was happening in terms of hiring. So I had seen this one view as a student, as a person trying to navigate life. And then I went smack into the completely opposite direction to see the challenges that these companies and these hiring managers and the miscommunication between hiring managers and HR, to see this totally other world that was related to what I was experiencing, that's when it all really hit me, that I was like, because I'd sit there and I'd take these job recs, which was essentially them listing out all of the skills they thought they needed for that particular job. And there was no iPad or anything. It was like full paper, pen and pad. And I'd be writing this down. And we used to call it, which I think is still probably a term, it was like the unicorn that they'd be looking for. Some people call it a purple squirrel, but it was always this laundry list of skills that had nothing to do with one another once you learn about these jobs. And then they would be like, but I'd like them to have a PhD. And I'd sit there and I was like, oh, okay.
And this is before the advent of big data, and because like now those laundry lists can actually be mapped to these huge, like the LinkedIn data set, for example, like these huge data sets out there. And that's a lot of what hiring and recruiting has become today, but this was 15 odd years ago, right?
Yeah, this is just about a little over 15 years ago. But it was just started. There were ATS systems, there were things, but we had a system internally at Randstad that we used. You had to be super creative at Boolean search to get through that system. It wasn't like it was today, but it was the beginnings of it. And that's where, when I left from that particular job, because 2.5 hours of a commute each way, can only last for so long, no matter
Yeah.
how old you are. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Hard pass. I did an hour each way and it was a nightmare. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a friend of mine down here at the Jersey Shore, which was just better in terms of commuting and all of that good
Yeah.
stuff too. But
Quality of life. Yeah.
he had this idea, and it was a little before its time, but it was a really interesting idea on pay-per-click job postings. And so I joined him in this startup. And I think we were like 10 of us, maybe. There was a small group, young people. And then we ended up getting our hands on a failing startup. And that essentially, this failing startup, which was called Employon, was the first, they patented job scraping back in 2000. So this was really the first, even though they didn't call themselves a labor market analytics firm, this was really like the first of that kind of generation of let's try to figure out this data from a totally different perspective. And it was my client at the time, who I still work with today, was the state of New Jersey, was the Department of Labor. And it was like financial crisis hit in 2008. And all of a sudden, everyone was scrambling. And these skills, and especially from my one client, Justina, these skills were, to me, once I started to see the ideas which she was coming up with, because I wasn't even a data person or anything like that. So I didn't have any inkling. I knew enough. That was really my first breath into it. But just to see how this, and to know from my experience and what I handle, and then to see that this could actually help, this could move the needle. This could help them just communicate better, because a lot of it was so manual. There was it was so easy to miscommunicate.
Yeah, a lot of inefficiency and waste, and
completely
a lot of time wasted and money wasted. Lots of times big data is a solution in search of a problem, but this is a real problem that this started to really streamline the employment pipeline.
Yes.
And it sounds like you were in a kind of bird's eye view to watch that whole industry emerge.
Yeah, it was. Now that I look back, at the time, you never know these things when you're doing them. But at the time I look back, and I feel so fortunate to have, for all of the weird twists and turns, to take me where they did, because it cemented a passion in me to be able to see, like, there was something, and I must have realized this at an early age, but I just, again, the pieces don't fall together right away all the time. But what I realized was I really love helping people. And in that time, for me, being in the Northeast, when you experience something like 9/11, and especially the community where I lived, we lost, I'm so thankful not to have lost direct family members, but we lost so many friends and people in our community. To see what happens in a moment of crisis when people come together and help each other. And then again, the 2008 financial crisis was like especially a hard hit on the Northeast area. And to see these people that were struggling on unemployment now, today with COVID, this is just a completely larger version of this. When you see people really struggling to put food on the table and take care of their families, and you figure out a way to help them, there is something about that is a whole different level of feeling, but also like excitement, right? And that's really how I felt about all of this. And this has not changed. We've just come further along now, but that cemented this passion in me to figure out, how can I help people that maybe because of life circumstance, they weren't like dealt the luck that I was dealt, but even I felt like I was dealt this. There were still challenges. So if there's challenges, like, how can we not help these people? And it's the same today. It really is. It's just, the unfortunate part about it is that we've come far along, but we're still experiencing this. So I know that there's more to do, which just drives me more. It doesn't, make me sad or anything like that. It just drives me to know that there's still more that we can do. But we've done so much so far. And it's really just been a fantastic way to look about this. And I can't be any more thankful than to be a part of that small group that had these crazy ideas and took them somewhere.
And then that turned into EMSI, or?
Well, yes, I fast forwarded the story there a little bit. So we ended up creating the idea for the original analytics tool for job postings, and we sold that to Burning Glass.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so then I was acquired. I was like one of two people that were acquired by Burning Glass. At the time, Burning Glass was a resume parsing company. So it was, but we really saw so much potential around taking this job data and then the supply data from like resumes and pulling that together. And we all saw it, Burning Glass as well. It was a really fun time. And then Justina from New Jersey came to join the team, and it was fascinating. I was with them for a good 8 or so years in the whole scheme of things, helping build up their company. And when I left a little over 4 years ago, I left really because of a couple things, like life circumstance. At the time, I had just had my third child and navigating being like a working parent. And again, these are in the moment, it was difficult. But when I look back, like this has actually helped me so much now to better understand struggles that people have in their life and why they feel like they can't be successful in their career. So I had that and I experienced that, and I needed to figure that out. I did some consulting directly for schools. Again, it was just bringing these passions together for me. Here in New York and New Jersey, I worked with Columbia for about a year. And then I worked on a few different projects with CUNY and a few others, but there was unfinished business. It was just, there was something about it. And so Justina ended up at EMSI about 3 years prior to me ending up there. And she had always let me know, this is what we're working on. We can do this. And that's what got me. And I came here a little over a year ago to just continue along this fantastic work. EMSI is such a wonderful organization. They really focus. They also are owned by Strata Education Network, very mission focused organizations, very personally aligned with where my focus was. Because again, my focus is mainly that experience that I had in school. I really want people in general to be able to harness their power and be able to make better decisions in their life, because it really truly doesn't matter at what level you are, at how many challenges come your way, like you can still be successful. And that just means understanding and navigating your life and your learning to be able to be successful. So they have like very aligned missions, and that's why I'm here. And the concept around what we do at EMSI with this open skills, I'm really focused on open skills standards, because like I said, when you go through, it's almost like a renovation. That's the way I would describe it, is like when you've done this already, you see where there's things that could be done a little bit better. Like, oh man, I shouldn't have put that bulkhead there. Or, you know, it's like that where we're like, oh yeah, if we do it this way, I think we can get further. And so we're in this place where we can look at this with a slightly different lens. We realize that opening up some of this data that was initially really enclosed in these bubbles in various organizations is allowing more communication to happen broadly. And and the communication being the 3 circles around like people, education, which I tend to call like learning, but because that can happen outside of education.
I'm a big fan of learning, despite the name of the podcast.
Exactly. And then it with employers. And I feel like as long as we can help them communicate better together, we can move the needle on just creating the better efficiencies in hiring and learning for people. And I think this benefits employers and educators alike. You know, it's one of those. So
I like the way you were pulling the pieces together as you told the story. I think they call it dramatic irony. Like frequently the protagonist doesn't see the connections until later on in the narrative, but it does seem like things have come together for you. So with that, let's talk about skills, baby, right? That's the next piece in the narrative. That's the next active that you've started relatively recently. Can you give us a little more perspective on what that is and what you're trying to do there?
I would love to. All of this, like I said, is just such a passion for me. This all started, well, I think the idea started in March. I think I launched it, I want to say it was May, maybe it was late April. Now again, this year, it's like the year of 1,000 days.
Months count as years at least. Yes.
This really came from, you've now heard my story of why skills and why I care about this. But another thing happened in my life, and another reason why I made a change back in 2016 was that my daughter, my middle daughter, so I have 3 children, my middle daughter, who's now 10, I found out, and she was diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, and anxiety. She was in kindergarten, but I had seen the inklings prior to that. And unfortunately, it has been quite a challenge to advocate for her. But in advocating for her within our school district, and also just seeing how she approached life and how people treated her because she was different in their minds. She didn't follow all the rules. She wasn't that child that sat there and kindly she was bouncing all around and she was labeled this bad child, which she's not at all. If anyone that knows her, she's just the sweetest child. But to see this and through a child's perspective, it dawned on me her biggest issue was confidence and low self-esteem. And there's something that sparked me. So I went through postpartum depression pretty awfully with all of my children, but especially badly after my third child was born. And it was about the same time that this was happening. So the interesting thing was to help her grow was also helping me grow.
Makes sense.
And it was in that moment that I realized there's a missing piece to what I'm focused on, because I am focused on helping people figure out potential pathways that they can gain skills and there's so many ways to navigate life to be successful. Honestly, it's open-ended. But here's the thing, if you don't believe that you can do it, then it doesn't matter how many options we find for you and present to you and give you the easiest ways to navigate, you won't do it. And you won't do it because I've seen it happen. I've seen someone and I've seen it at an extremely young age, and I've seen it in myself to know that you will just shut down. And that to me, even though most people wouldn't necessarily coin what I talk about growth mindsets as skills, to be honest, they're the most important skills in life.
And in order to grow, you have to put yourself into those difficult situations where you have to power through the imposter syndrome. That's also why as parents, you have to encourage your kids to put that effort forward, because a lot of it really is about grit, and it is about doing the reps really to develop the skills. And these are the types of things you talk about on your show regularly. So if folks do want to track you and track the show, where should they go? Should they just look for Let's Talk About Skills, baby? Where should they go?
So it's on Spotify. It's under that title. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, and it's also on a YouTube channel. The recordings are done however you like to consume your media. You can listen, you can watch. But it is really a combination of these two pieces of my life, which is this ability I love talking with people about how they built their skills in life, what's made them successful and how they navigated that, because it's so inspiring, everyone's story. And then also to share in our world of skills, innovations that are happening, but also for everyday people to understand these innovations because they're truly helpful to how they can navigate their life too. It's a mixture of these two things, just these two passions meshed together into one arena.
As we were setting up here, we were both reflecting on, despite the fact that it seems like a kind of narrow through line in terms of skill development, in essence, it's all learning is skill development. Everything can be broken down into being skills-based. And the thing that's really interesting to me as a trend is the shelf life of skills, and the fact that a lot of the skills that we're learning today, particularly the high in demand digital skills, are going to be outdated in the next 3 to 5 years, generally speaking. Do you have any perspective on that?
Oh, definitely. And there is a ton of data that can show the same, but I'll just speak more generally. The way the world is changing, digital skills, technical skills have that shorter shelf life. So I would say maybe even a little less than 3 to 5 years, but it depends. Every area of the world might have a slightly different view on that. And that's the way data works. But there are these skills, which again, you can call them a number of different things. I know you like to call them 21st century skills. We could call them resilient skills. That's what we call them here at EMSI.
Well, I like to say 21st century skills because we all got to pay those 21st century bills. It's like a hook line. It's a hook line. That's why I say it. I
love it. No, I love it. And I tend to call them life skills, but it's really traditionally we would have referred to these as soft skills or
Yeah.
transferable skills,
Mm-hmm.
because these are the skills that there are a lot of things that are happening. Everyone can read all of the wonderful news out there in regards to automation,
Yep.
in regards to the changing skills. We will always, as people in this society today, will have to adjust and change. You and I starting podcasts, things like that, new technologies. You just mentioned another one that you were trying, like a different version of Zoom that you were trying.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of, as things change, you can quickly navigate and pivot. But the underlying set of skills that will carry you through always will be the most, it seems very simple, but just the ability to communicate, just the ability to write. Surprisingly, most employers, these are the skills that they find the hardest time filling. It is so fascinating to me. And these are the ones that I think most new grads today tend to not have as developed as a lot of the grads of the past. And I would say for anyone, I think just happiness in life really comes down to this like positive thinking, being able to control, like we were talking about social and emotional learning, but that's essentially it. There's 1,000 different phrases to call it, but really the power over your own mind is so important. Your social IQ, as some people may say, and then that ability to be able to adjust and be able to handle those things. COVID-19, sadly enough, this is a big deal, but there will be things in life that are a big deal and it'll be okay.
Yeah. And then to be able to quickly learn new digital skills is something the world is learning now in light of COVID. And then also being able to self-regulate and manage yourself, be empathetic, be a good communicator, be a good teammate. The quote unquote soft skills, I really like the phrase transferable skills. I don't think I'd heard that before, but I like that because also soft is a little bit like, it's soft, I can ignore it.
I know. They used to call it that because they were typically more feminine.
Right.
That's what they would refer to them as. Which is, they're just in almost every job field across the board. Those are the same skills that are required. And that's why transferable skills, because they transfer to any type of job you may be interested in.
But then even on the flip side, the less transferable skills are also frequently necessary. Like it's not an either or scenario. Like most things, it's not an either or where you need to have I get social emotional baby side of things. There you go. I'm doing all my hooks for you. But yeah, the other side I think is really important. It's just maybe that the shelf life is fast, so short, which does argue also for continuing to learn throughout your life course, which is one of the things that I think both you and I probably share at about as fundamental a level as possible. I'm really passionate about this, is that you don't stop learning once you get your diploma. And if you're not learning while you're on the job, you're going to soon be out of a job, because the way the world works, the job you're doing today is not the job you're going to be doing in 2 to 3 years, even if you don't change job title or change job. The world changes. It reminds me of Bill Taylor, one of the guys who was at Fast Company's HBR guy, but he likes to say, are you learning as fast as the world is changing? And I love that thought, although it's really scary these days because the world's changing so fast. Any perspective on that?
I think that's just the way to look at it. I'm a huge proponent of lifelong learning. I think sometimes we get ourselves a little overwhelmed because we think that lifelong learning has to be something massive. Like I need to go back and get a master's at an Ivy League. I need to have a PhD. That's not necessarily what we mean. And I think it's easier if you look at it chunked down a little bit. Lifelong learning is little things over time. I do gratefulness exercises every day. And it's so funny because some days I've just been able to read a chapter of a book. Some days I've just read one person's tweet. But I try to look for smaller learning opportunities every day. On a weekend, when I learned to set up the podcast, it was like my kids actually have heard me say this so often that I've caught them saying it too. Like I'll come out of my office sometimes and I'm like, I'm so awesome, because I just figured out something that I didn't know. So sometimes it's not this huge thing like you've earned a certificate or this brand new degree. Sometimes you just learned how to make yourself an Instagram account, and that's still learning. And those are the things that we're talking about in terms of lifelong learning. Sometimes if you're looking to learn Python, that may require you to go and find yourself. There are so many ways to consume learning now. You've got thousands of free courses. You've got thousands of certified courses. You've got everything through any higher education provider.
It's almost too much, really.
I mean, sometimes it is a little overwhelming, but the point being that whatever it is that you need for the time that you have, for everyone has life responsibilities. So whatever it is that you can fit into your life circumstance, I swear it is available. And you don't need to look at it as this huge looming, like, I'm going to take years to move on to this degree. It's a little teeny, someone in one of my podcasts said something about micro innovations. And that's just like the terminology that I use. It's micro, as long as you are interested in learning something new every day. And it could be that smallest thing, that one chapter in that book, that whatever little thing, and you just need to recognize that, oh, I did it. Yes.
Exactly. And that's a big insight. And I think it relates a little bit to the whole mindset idea, where if you have this mindset that you're always hungry for new skills, you're always hungry to learn, and maybe you also have a maker's mindset where, like, you want to see, I did that, I've just made something. Those are things that are beneficial in terms of the transferable skills that we were talking about before. I would like to pivot a little bit to the employer side of the equation. Any trends emerging there? Any ways in which smart organizations are getting out ahead of these major disruptions by having a sharp orientation towards labor skills analytics?
There is actually, this is like in my perspective, this is the hottest area right now. And it actually was pre-COVID. I'm not going to lie. Like, I really thought this was where the future was. But a lot of organizations, what's not different from when I worked at Ronstadt this 15-ish years ago, is that employers really don't necessarily understand the skills that their employees have. They also don't necessarily understand, because they don't have that visibility, it's difficult for them to know, do I upskill or reskill someone internally, or do I hire externally? It actually costs an organization quite a significantly higher amount of money to hire someone externally than to build up internally. And so at EMSI, we called this build versus buy concept. But this is just something that employers are really trying to understand and navigate right now. And there are numerous amounts of startups and groups out there that are attempting to tackle this. At EMSI, we are also working on some various technologies to help organizations do just the same thing. We actually published a cybersecurity build versus buy concept report not too long ago, to help organizations just know, what is it? How would I even navigate this? But from a data perspective, it's not all that difficult to take the first step and implement just a few pieces of technology to give you this visibility. I know I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn, and it was something to the effect of, data is like oil. And then there were different layers of, then you need to like refine. Before, so you can't just gathering the data is this one step, but like the analytics is like the refinery of this. And I forgot what the third one was, but it was just it just made so much sense.
Fill her up.
Exactly. So there's data galore. It's just a matter of harnessing and using that. And that's the issue with employers. Like, they just have their employee data is in so many various systems. So it's just like encapsulating that, pulling it together, and then analyzing that. And like I said, EMSI has some really great tools that do that to really help you navigate. And I think, in all honesty, it saves organizations a ton of money to have that understanding, and more broadly, and then also for their pipeline externally, to be able to build out and understand what they need on a regular basis. Things for them are changing so quickly, and that's why they're having trouble keeping up. Like, all of a sudden someone will say, like, what's R?
Then, to your point though, if they're not developing those skills, you're not building, you're buying, there's not really any connection to the talent you're bringing in. You don't really understand what they're bringing, and then they're likely to turn over faster than the people you build. So if there've been a lot of conversations about how learning as a benefit is becoming a real, almost table stakes for organizations nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is that the majority, I forget what the percentage is, but the majority of employees don't even take advantage of it.
Right.
I was chatting with someone the other day at Coursera the other day,
Mm-hmm.
that had said they saw a spike when COVID first started.
Right.
They have their consumer directly to consumer offerings, but then they have their directly to company offerings. The direct to consumer offerings, huge spike in sort of these like resilient courses, the growth mindset.
Yeah.
Internally at organizations, it went down because people were still scared. They thought, oh my gosh, what kind of label is that going to put on me if I was to go and take this through my employer? And so they actually went around and did this whatever communication it was to their employers. And then they started to see the huge spike when the employers turned around to their employees and were like, no, this is okay. Like we're not going to be labeled negatively for wanting to take courses that have to do with your mental health. Like it is completely fine. But to be honest, the majority of employees don't take advantage. And even when they do, like you said, there are so many offerings. Like, how do I even know what direction? And so this concept of this personalized learning and career pathway internally at an organization, we have a match model here at EMSI that really allows us to see what types of skills an employee currently has, what job postings look like at that organization. And then depending on what they might be interested in. And I say that, and I really want to push on that a moment, because happiness is not just what job does my employee, like we don't only want to think about from an employer perspective, what jobs can I fill? We want our employees to be happy because that's also what retaining them, that's a huge part of it. So depending on what direction they're interested in going, you can almost offer up learning opportunities that fit and fill the gaps of where they want to go, as opposed to just, it's like Google, it's going on Amazon and searching for white sheets. I actually had someone text me the other day. They were like, what white sheets do you have? Because I'm trying to buy them. And I don't even know the thread count, there's so many options. And that's how learning can be sometimes. You don't even know what direction. So it's this, it's personalized, but it's very prescriptive. And so they don't have to be the ones that are, the employee doesn't have to be the one that knows it all. We can just offer up the options on a silver platter, depending on what direction, like here's your best options. And every time you make a move, this is the coolest part to me. Every time you go in one direction, you take one bit of learning content, the skills that you have and what we call a skill shape adjusts and changes. And that means your windows of opportunity also adjust and change. So I think of like, when I envision this, it's almost like I carry this backpack and it's filled with my skills through life. And then every little thing that I do, and this could be in work, this could be in life, this could be through some formal learning, we're adding these skills to our backpack. And if we don't understand what's in our backpack, then we don't understand what things we can do.
And we don't understand which skills build on each other. And I love the idea of being data driven and having, on the organizational side, building a learning culture eat strategy for lunch. Another one I like to just throw out there a lot.
No,
like,
I totally agree.
You know,
totally.
and I think you got to walk the walk even as leaders too. Like there is always, I've heard in different versions of this, but the most effective CEOs are constantly reading books, you know, or at least
I feel like they say like at least a book a week.
I think they might have staff who do it for them, but that's a separate point. But yeah, so this has been fantastic. Love the work that you're doing. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Before we let you go, the one thing I always like to ask my guests, and maybe we've touched on some of it already, but if you could just bring it home, what other trends are you noticing in the world around you that you think are relevant, are important, are worth noting? And open floor, but I'd love to hear anything that's capturing your imagination these days.
Man, there are so many things, and I don't think that surprises you at all. But I think what really is so interesting to me today is that, and I think COVID has helped with this in one sense, is that mental health is like right there in front of us. Everybody, it's all out on display right now. We're living our lives out loud. You and I were talking about kids earlier. The fluidity of our life and the way that this has come together on a global scale, as opposed to like when I was describing 9/11 before, which it just happened to this one little area or a couple little areas. This is like this massive effect that everyone is experiencing at the same time. And the empathy that's creating and the awareness that's creating for tons of the challenges that as the global society has been trying to solve for many years.
Yeah.
That has captured my attention quite a lot, because what that is allowing is for people to make innovations and to make changes at scale in a way that things were just moving at a snail's pace before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in terms of those innovations, the things that I think I feel like this is no surprise to you at all, but the movement of entrepreneurs, I think is just that mindset, whether you're internally an entrepreneur, like an intrapreneur for an organization, or externally an entrepreneur, or some mix of both, the way that's starting to really get a foothold at the younger ages and carry through in terms of education is just I'm like so happy for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, just what we described with these companies trying to navigate in a different way, create these different cultures. And what I would really say is it's this like adaptive culture, because people interact in different ways depending on the culture that they're in. And I think companies starting to recognize this. And again, and it's really truly because a lot of this like mindset, mental awareness that's happening, that companies are realizing that they're going to have to change. And I would say one of the last ones I'll mention, although there's so many, it's hard to choose.
Plus you have a podcast, people, you can't give it all away, Kelly.
I can't. But one more is that the data, people data, starting to go into the hands directly to people, because the way that, and I think we're going to start to see a huge change in how higher education, educators, anyone who offers learning content is going to adjust because of how people will be able to make better decisions, and also employers. This sort of ability for the person to have their own wallet of information that they carry through life. I just think there's going to be a big necessary needed shift, and that's going to be the epicenter of it.
Wow. Amazing stuff. Really fun getting you on the show. Lots of lessons learned, lots of insight around skills and the labor market, whether you're an employer, an educator, or an employee, or just a human. Thanks so much for being on the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, we'll be back again soon. Thanks as always for listening.